Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I am joined by Dr. Phil Batty, who is Consultant in Sport and Exercise Medicine at the newly opened Cleveland Clinic. So we'll get round to your latest career move later on. But Phil, do you want to tell me a bit about you, where you're from originally?
Well, hi. Hello, everybody that's watching. I was born in Lancaster and brought up around Lancaster, went to school in Lancaster. And I guess, my childhood memories largely revolve around going to Old Trafford with my dad, who sadly died when I was only 11. But, I've got many happy memories of the Lancaster and Lune Valley area from where I spent my childhood.
Right, okay. And then what was it about your childhood that made you want to get into this line of work in sports medicine?
Well, I didn't really plan to come into sports medicine. I mean, there wasn't really a living to be made medically in sports medicine at that time. I always wanted to be a general practitioner and be a generalist and sort of, embed in a sort of rural community and be part of that community. That was always my ambition. My dad had said, if he'd had his time again, he was a chartered surveyor. But if he'd had his time again, he would have been interested in medicine because it felt, that could lead to travel all over the world, which he didn't do professionally. And, via sport, I've managed to do that rather by accident than design. So yeah, initially I went to Liverpool University, which is an interesting place to be in the 80s when you're a Manchester United supporter and Liverpool are winning everything. And but I had, it's a great city that I love, and had a wonderful time there. Then did my GP training around Chester and North Wales, and then the practice. It was by accident again rather than design. I ended up in a semi-rural practice around Lancaster where I was born. So seeing people that I'd actually known of as a kid, girlfriend's parents were patients and former teachers were patients, and so GP was my goal. I always knew that there would need to be some other side interest to GP, and I sort of initially that was occupational health, and then opportunities started to appear in sport, but when I started in football back in '96 at Manchester United, I was the number 2. Mike Stone had just been appointed the number 1, and he was working pretty much full time in general practice, and he would go in the club on a Monday morning and a Friday morning, and he'd only be present at home games and away European games, and that was it. That was the limit. If all you're doing is 2, possibly 3 sessions a week, you're really not going to be paying a mortgage on that. So there really was no significant money for doctors in football at that time.
And so how was it for you then? How did you get your opportunity to work at that time? And if there wasn't really a full-time thing for the full-time, well, the main doctor?
So yeah, I'm a bit of a fraud, to be honest with you. It was a bit of an administrative mistake, really, because it started off because when my son was born back in '93, the sort of romantic in me sort of had my dad in mind and Manchester United. And I'd very rarely been to Manchester United since then, and getting tickets was almost impossible. Certainly, there was a massive waiting list for season tickets. So, but you could join Manchester United as a member. So I thought I'd let him join as a member. I'd put him forward to join as a member, and basically, you got a couple of freebies, a mag every quarter, and that was it. And that was the plan. And for some reason, a few months later, this letter came through to him, and he was about 12 months old at this stage, saying, "Dear Mr. Batty, your application for a season ticket at Manchester United has been successful. Send us a check." And I thought I hadn't applied for a season ticket, but hey, whoa, this is a bit unusual. And so I sent off the check thinking they're going to find me out. Anyway, I ended up with a season ticket. And my wife, Joanne, has been incredibly supportive, and she knew I was working hard. GP, then you were working long hours. You had to do your own on-call overnight, weekends and things. So with the support of my partners in the practice, and what have you. So I'd go to United games, home games, and that would be my sort of little escape, if you will. And I saw in a programme that the former club doctor had retired, and that Mike Stone had taken over as the team doctor, and the name Mike Edelson was there, as he was the director responsible for medical matters. So I thought, oh, I've got a name. I'll write a letter and I'll just send off a CV, because I'd done a bit of sports medicine, but not much. And so I sent off a CV thinking I might end up sort of doing a crowd doctor type thing or something of that nature. And anyway, they pulled me forward to an interview, and I had an interview, and ended up sort of being the sort of number 2 doctor, which was covering A and B team games at home before there was the academy structure there is now, and games at the Cliff, and working with great people like Dave Fever, who I worked with for a long time, and it sort of happened like that. So I was a very capable and able GP when I went into it, but I sort of, my sports medicine knowledge needed certainly a brush up, and with the help of a number of courses, but particularly Dave and Rob Swire and the team that were at Manchester United, that sort of gave me a sort of part-time foot in the door whilst working, but it was very part-time. It would be an occasional Wednesday afternoon, and alternate, or maybe 2 out of 3 Saturday mornings. It was very, very part-time, and I was paid £50 for each session, and that was it.
And what was it like going into Man United at that point? They're in their, in their absolute peak, really. So what was it like going into that environment as a Man U fan?
Oh, it was it was sort of incredible for me. I was seeing sort of obviously people that were heroes, but trying to be normal and not appear excited or like a kid, as you can do. So no, it was great. Charlotte Ferguson was incredible, as was Brian Kidd, who was the number 2 at the time, and seeing all these young evolving players that obviously went on to great things was amazing. So that period from 96 to 99 was incredible, and I left just with Dave to go to Blackburn. That was my opportunity to be a sort of number 1, and then effectively from that point I was half time, 60% at Blackburn, and then cut my GP to sort of 45% of the time. And we both left and resigned, a day or 2 after they'd won the Champions League, because we'd been in discussions with Blackburn, who had just been relegated. Then moved on to Blackburn Rovers.
So do you think as soon as you got that role with Manchester United, you thought that your days of being full-time GP was pretty much, how long did it take to think, actually, no, I really do want to be working in this environment for as much as I can?
Well, it was always a gamble, because it's quite, particularly then, it's quite nice in working in the NHS. It's secure, it's safe, it's a job for life, it's got a great pension, so you're secure. So leaving, and in fact one of my former girlfriend's father, who was a patient and a consultant radiologist, when he heard that I was subsequently leaving, he really said, what are you doing? You're making the biggest mistake of your life here. You've got great practice here, you've got good colleagues, you're sorted, what are you doing? I think I also thought, well, I'll hedge my bets to start off with. Again, there weren't that many opportunities. So from sort of 99 to 2003, I sort of did the sort of 50 to 55% Blackburn Rovers and sort of 45% GP, thinking, well, if it goes pear-shaped, then I can end up going back into GP at that stage. And then I thought in 2003, the English Institute of Sport started taking off, and they were offering some sessions at Manchester. And I thought, well, this is an opportunity for me to work with a whole range of sports and leave general practice. So in 2003, was the time when I thought, right, okay, I'm going to take the plunge here. I'm going to have faith in this and give it a whirl. And, you know, if push comes to shove, we'll see where we go. But that's when, which again, you know, was, you know, my wife was very supportive, but I did that at a stage where, you know, I got young children between 6 and 10, 3 kids, mortgage to pay, all those sorts of things. So it was inevitably a risk from a financial perspective at that time. And so, you know, it was 2003 that I thought that's the situation. And then, you know, other curveballs, which we may talk about, sort of happened to sort of alter my plan.
And so did you ever feel then, because you've got the GP role, but did you ever feel when you started taking these other roles in sport that you were insecure, there's potential for you to lose your job there?
Oh, yeah, the vagaries of sport, you know, I knew that. I mean, God bless him. When I went to Blackburn, obviously Jack Walker was the owner, and you're thinking, well, Jack's an old man. He's financed Blackburn Rovers. It's spectacular, but he's not going to be around forever. And within 18 months, well, I think, you know, I thought through what happens if Brian Kidd gets the sack. What's that going to mean for me job-wise? What happens if Jack Walker passes away, and you know, and there isn't the commitment to the club? What if? Those are the what ifs, and basically within about 12 months, both had happened. So, you know, it was always going to be a risk. I was very mindful of it.
And then, so making that move then to go into being the lead doctor, how did you find that transition?
It was good because it meant I had more time, so I could feel my way into it and get to know the players better. But I had incredible support from Dave, because obviously he was far more experienced than me. So having Dave there to sort of bounce stuff off was you know, invaluable, really. And also, you know, the club had an existing relationship with a consultant orthopedic surgeon called John Hodgkinson, who was very much the club orthopedic surgeon. And John was just a dream to work with. Again, to sort of have that support and bounce things off and learn from people. And, you know, I felt we were a team. And so collectively we could deal with it.
And then, so as you and Dave moved at the same time, then was that something that you would discuss, or was it like a coincidence that Brian Kidd got you both together?
No, it was sort of Brian, you know, had decided to get Dave, and the doctor was retiring, and so he said, look, we need a doctor, and Dave very kindly recommended me. So basically, we both sorted it out at the same time. So right. It was. And I think we finalised the contract. We both sorted it out, you know, similarly. Dave signed up first, and then I met with I'd obviously known Kiddo from United, but then I met with John Williams, who was the chief exec at the time, and Tom Finney was the finance director, and sort of went through the process at Blackburn, and had some interviews. And was appointed basically on Dave and Kiddo's recommendation.
And what was it like? I'm sure we'll come back to this at some point as well, but when you were working with legendary people like Sir Alex Ferguson and Brian Kidd, what's it like when you're interacting with them? Is it on a daily basis? Like, how do you find working with those type of people?
Well, Sir Alex, I didn't have that much interaction with. There'd be bits, but it would be quite remote. But you know, but you know, what a leader. And then with all managers, really, you're usually interacting with them when you're in the club on a daily basis about, you know, various issues.
Yeah, and then so the EIS role that came up, you were doing that at the same time. Is that you cut down your GP duties?
I left GP in 2003 and went and sort of did, you know, my mornings at Blackburn Rovers finished at sort of lunchtime, and then I'd do 4 sessions. Then I'd hop in my car and drive up to Manchester and do 4 sessions a week or for the English Institute of Sport, working across all sorts of sports people, but with greater emphasis on squash, disability, swimming, and wheelchair rugby. Those were sort of the main things that I was dealing with when I was at the English Institute of Sport. But it was in its genesis, so it was very, very quiet to start off with.
And then how do you find that? So you've been dealing with obviously general practice, but then you're going into football, so you've got some good experience there. But then when you're going into such a multi-sport centre, even though it is limited in terms of the specifics that you just said there, but how do you find that when you're looking at the whole body, so to speak?
Well, I think if you follow your normal structures, you can get quite a long way. And if you've learned your craft, and for me, that craft is taking a good history, listening to patients, and usually if you do that well, the patient will tell you what's wrong with them. For the most part, you can get a real good sense of what's wrong with them. And then if you've got a good sort of system of clinical examination, and you go through that process, and then you again sort of might feel about certain investigations, but you try and involve the athlete or patient in their management and decision making and explore what their worries are. That will take you a very, very long way. So ultimately, then it's about teasing it out. So if you've got those fundamentals right, then you can layer onto it, and with various experience, and obviously I've been around a long time now, so I've seen a lot of things. So you can recall your own patient experience. You can recall articles you've read. You can recall conference presentations. So ultimately, or you can phone a friend and chat to people. So ultimately, there's always a way. In the end, but you may not be able to make a decision straight away because you might not have sufficient information. But there is a way if you follow your structure and you trust your structure, which is, I think, where I got to in terms of, and I think that was one of the great benefits of spending some time in general practice before I went into sport.
Then you mentioned about speaking to other people. How strong was the network? And then the kind of second part to that, the genesis of sports medicine, the development, was that really starting to grow at that early 2000s period?
Yeah, it was. I mean, EIS had started off, and then it sort of grew more towards the sort of late noughties, because with the Olympic bid for 2012, there was part of the legacy that the country would create a new specialty, a new medical specialty of sport and exercise medicine, which there hadn't been before 2008. So that really meant that, because in medicine, you were either on the GP register, which I was, or you're on the specialist register, which is where most hospital doctors are. And this became a medical specialty. And there were NHS training programs, so there were trainees starting, and then those of us that had been around for a long time were sort of starting to put in applications and submit documents. And it took me about 3 years and 1,400 pages of evidence to submit to get on the specialist register. So it started to take off then, because prior to that, it hadn't been a recognised specialty. You did it as, you either came from a GP background or perhaps an A&E background or a rheumatology background, and you sort of did it as an interest, as a sort of side to your main job.
And then, so how you mentioned earlier on about being able to speak to other of your peers about things. It's how common did that happen? How frequently did that happen when you were at EIS and within sport as well?
Well, EIS, it happened quite a bit, because we'd sort of often have case conferences and talk about things of that nature, which is quite interesting, because one of the problems of being a doctor in sport is that, you know, if you're working for a club, you are very isolated from your peers, very isolated. You're not working in a sort of, you're not even working in a medical environment with a sort of medical governance culture. It's very different. So you can get a little bit isolated from issues. So it was good to sort of network at EIS. I'd always felt that I'd got a good network of through, you know, radiologists and Dave and the physio team at Blackburn and John Hodgkinson and the consultants who were at Wrightington. So I was always able to network there, but less so with like-minded sports physicians until the EIS really started.
And so is that just because that's not got that team sort of tribalism, I guess? Is that easier to do it in that environment?
Well, there just weren't that many people around that were sports medicine doctors of experience.
Yeah.
There weren't that many.
And so you're at Blackburn, and how long did you do those jobs together then, Blackburn and EIS?
So probably only for around 12 months. Because in 2004, hit a curveball. I've got 3 children, a son and 2 daughters. And my daughter, who was 8 at the time, had a brain tumor, and so that set a whole new set of problems. She's fine now. She's 26 now, and well, but it was a challenging time, and so I sort of took time off from EIS and continued to drop into Blackburn Rovers, take my other kids to school, go into Blackburn Rovers, and then go back to pick up my kids from school, and then go and visit my daughter and my wife in Alderhay. So that was a challenging time, and the support I had from Blackburn, from John Williams, Graham Souness, Dave, and Paul at that time, Paul Kelly, was really incredibly supportive. But it threw up a whole set of educational issues and challenges with, you know, not attractive support for Anna, and you know, we weren't sure if she was left-handed or right-handed after the operation. There was a lot of rehab involved in terms of getting her to walk again and various things. So I left the EIS and came to an agreement with an independent school with a great sporting heritage in Cumbria called Sedbergh School. So I sort of then combined my job at Blackburn Rovers with the school job as the school doctor, and it was a small, single-handed, limited list NHS practice, but it had, I didn't realise at the time, but it had, you know, an immense sporting curriculum with lots of sports injuries and lots of real challenges. So that was another area of real learning for me, based on, you know, patients and case mix. And so I sort of combined the two. So I was back doing some GP, technically, although it was largely a sports injury practice, but there was lots of GP stuff as well. And I combined that, and you know, that was a really happy mix for some time. That sort of went from 2004 to really 2011, and they were really, really happy times.
So that obviously would be terrible time with your daughter. Like, how did you find it being a doctor yourself? Is that a kind of blessing or a curse when you've got that particular condition that she's experiencing?
Bit of both, really. I think we got it as quickly as we could have done, because, you know, I was informed that often for children around that time, you know, it would take 8 or 9 different consultations with different doctors over a period of years for the diagnosis to be made. So we got it as quickly, I think, as we could have. And again, you know, with my medical colleagues, there was a bit of denial and, you know, resistance to prospect that it could be something of this nature initially. So it was, I had to hold my head and just trust my judgment in that sense. So from diagnosis perspective, it was a great help. And then yeah, I think it was overall helpful to be able to engage with neurosurgeons and people of that nature from a medical perspective. We could sort of cut the niceties out and get straight to the language, if you know what I'm, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. We didn't have to sort of be a soft, as you would do with people. We could have a dispassionate conversation, and and they could speak to me in strong words, and I could speak to them in strong words if I wasn't happy with one or two things. So so from that perspective, it worked quite well, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm glad she's better now. That's great news. And then, so that you were there for that school for quite a long time. What happened after? Was it around Man City time that happened?
So yeah, it sort of got it all sort of became a little. Blackburn was great, and it was such a family club, and I loved it. And I'm fortunate that one or two people had approached me over the years to say, would I be interested in change? And I just was not interested. It was just such a great team, great setup. We were sort of, overachieving on a number of things, qualifying for Europe. We won the League Cup. We did some stuff that was, and this was in spite of sadly losing Jack and the financial support dropping. So everybody was on the same page. It was such a great club that I wasn't really interested in that balance. I essentially saw myself doing that balance of school and Blackburn for as long as possible. And then another change happened, that the club was sold from the Jack Walker Trust to the Venkies, and then some rather strange decisions started to be made, and some very good people were removed from the club, and it all got a little bit chaotic. And I thought at the time, well, I don't want to hang around. I applaud those that did hang around, but I didn't want to hang around and think and try and compare it to what it was and just be sort of, well, in the good old days. So I thought, that's fine. The club's moved on now. It's got new owners. We'll see if there's any new opportunities. And an opportunity came up at Manchester City, and I was approached by the headhunters as to whether I would throw my hat in the ring, and I decided to do so. And after 7 interviews, it was a long process. I was fortunate to get that role.
So 7 interviews.
Yeah, including headhunters and stuff. All the way through the process was 7 interviews.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that time because we had some involvement on some the fit out of the Carrington basically was at that time. But what was that like for you going through that? It was 7 interviews. I'm intrigued to hear a bit more about that. But it seemed a little bit chaotic from the outside. It's like, we've got this money. What do we do with it? How do we implement this?
There's some great people at City. It was obviously the culture was having to change from them not being that successful over the previous 20 years or so to having that opportunity. So it was, I think the strangest thing was being a Manchester United fan and working for Manchester City. That was a strange thing. And I remember the first competitive game was the Community Shield at Wembley. And I came out of the tunnel in my Man City gear, and I saw about 3 or 4 of my old Manchester United muckers in Man United tracksuits, sort of waiting for me at the end of the tunnel there, arms crossed, arms folded, sort of tut-tutting me. So and they said, we never thought we'd see the day. And I said to them, neither did I, to be honest with you. But no, it was there's some great people there. It was exciting. It was a roller coaster. It was everything.
So yeah, I know you're joking in terms of that aspect of it, but then at the end of that season is one of the most iconic Premier League things, isn't it, with the Aguero goal? So how was that for you then, as a massive Man U fan? Literally, that goal lost your.
I wanted to win. I wanted to win. I know it was either us or United, but when you're embedded and when you're working with those people, you're in them day in, day out, you know, what have you get an emotional attachment to the people that you're working with. So it's inevitable. It was again, it was crazy. It was crazy.
And just in terms of the teams then, so you've worked with some of the most successful teams, and not Blackburn, not quite as the level of City and United at those times. But do you see much in terms of the mindset from management and players? Do you see a difference in that? And even from some of the other athletes that you've worked with from EIS or cricket or ballet or whatever?
Oh yeah, I think there is a winning mindset, undoubtedly, and it's uncompromising. You know, it is about pushing yourself and those around you to do their very best and to be their very best. And it is uncompromising. I mean, winning is difficult, so you can sense that. And you know, I've worked for other organizations where I haven't sensed quite that absolute commitment to be the best that one can possibly be.
And do you adapt your style for that? Obviously, there from the medical side of things, but there's a lot of that personal relationships as well. How do you have to manage the way that you deliver things to those different personality types?
Oh yeah, you have to be adaptable, and you know, it changes. From my roles now are very much as a consultancy, so I'll see people either at the clinic or I'll pop along to games and see them there. But I'm not embedded working with those people every day, you know, traveling with them all the time. You know, the relationship's much more at arm's length in some ways. So you don't know them as well. You do try and get to know them over a period of time, but it takes a little bit longer than, you know, in football. For example, in football, you start off usually getting to know them when either because you've known them for a little while as they've come through the academy, or you're the doctor that's doing the medical for them when they sign. So you get to spend a day with them going through the medical, and you get to know them very quickly.
Yeah, that medical always find intriguing as to the dynamic of it. It's always seen as that pass or fail, but from other people that you're speaking to, it's more of like an analysis on what things are to be considered if the club want to sign them.
Yeah, I've never ascribed to the pass fail. It's a risk assessment. It's a risk assessment, and you go through and score whether this is a high risk, medium risk, or low risk, you know, depending on the player. And then all sorts of things come into whether you know, that decision is finally made to buy the player. That can include, you know, how much it costs, you know, the value, what other player backup they've got. There's, you know, that's for a board of directors to decide. But for me, it's simply a risk assessment. Excuse me.
So, and then in terms of moving into more that consultancy role, was that a conscious decision that you didn't want to be in, say, football full time anymore, or was it just that the different roles came up that were of interest to you?
Well, I left Manchester City and then was the England Rugby doctor for a couple of years. So that was, that was largely almost full time again. One of the issues, if you are involved in sport, is you actually don't see that many injuries. I worry that I was going to become de-skilled, because in football, for example, a team will have possibly first team reserve, they'll possibly have 50 injuries a year. And of those, some of them don't even need to see a doctor. There might be a minor muscle strain, or there might be a bit of an ankle strain, or something of that nature that in any other walk of life wouldn't really see a doctor. So, and you might see an ACL every 2 years. And it's not massive patient exposure. So I've always made a conscious decision to work in a club and see and get my patient numbers up outside of a club, so that I'm continuing to maintain my skills. At City, I was immersed in it for probably 15 months and really couldn't do that, which sort of made me feel a bit vulnerable. When I went into rugby, I thought, right, okay, I'll do 4 days of rugby and I'll do 1 day a week. And I made arrangements with Ice Kinetic in London to do a day of clinic for them, to just, because I would see more in a day really than I would in a month from the rest of my work. So it was important for me to sort of maintain my skills, that I continued the patient exposure. So I've always been mindful of that, and I always knew that there's a time and a place in your life for various things, and I've been incredibly lucky in sport, but you reach a point where you've got to sort of transition a little bit, and let younger people come through that possibly got more energy than me now in certain situations. So I always knew that I would have to, transition out. I've been incredibly lucky how I've managed to do that.
So for that role at England Rugby and for Ice Kinetic then, so is that right, that it was your first job outside the northwest of this nature?
Yeah, it was. I'd left Manchester City, and I sort of then got asked to apply for the England Rugby job, and was thrilled to get that. And it's a great. I mean, matches are incredible. It's a great job, I think, for a period of time. So during the tournament phases, so the Six Nations, the summer tour, and I toured New Zealand and Argentina with them, and the autumn series, you're pretty much full on with the team in camp, working 16, 18-hour days, with a team of 3 physios and a couple of masseurs, just going through things in that sense. But if somebody gets injured in camp, and you're at Penny Hill Park or wherever, and it's a significant injury, you end up returning them to the club for major treatment. So that's slightly dissatisfying in terms of ongoing patient management from a purely professional viewpoint. So that's pretty intensive. And then the rest of the time, which is obviously a significant amount of the year, you are tracking players' injuries, seeing who picks up from the England squad, seeing who picks up injuries from the weekend games, ringing the clubs, and then getting out to sort of see the player if needs be. So you are all over the country. You could be in Exeter one day, then Newcastle and the rest, and there's only a certain amount of time that you sort of want to be traveling on the motorways and on trains and going around the country like some in that manner. So that was the less attractive part of the job, for sure.
So is that why you ended up leaving there then?
Partly, and I had a sixth sense, sadly. I had a sixth sense about there were a few family things coming up, and I knew that with the World Cup in 2015, which was a home World Cup, I had the feeling that we weren't going to do terribly well, and sadly we didn't. And I thought at the time, well, I either immerse myself in this and it will be, I'll be away from home for a long period of time with the build up to the World Cup, etc., and the World Cup. And there were family weddings and things of that nature. And I thought, well, okay, I'll do that if I'm pretty confident we're going to do really, really well. But I had this sort of sixth sense that that we might not do so well, and the opportunity arose to be medical director at Isokinetic at that time, that were just opening in London. And so I took a view and decided to go to Isokinetic.
So for that sort of role, it does seem a very different role. Like, what do you, for one, why do you think you were a good fit for them, and why was that something that you wanted to do at that point?
For Isokinetic, I'd never worked significantly in private practice in London before. I met them, Stefano Della Villa and Marco Della Villa and Mike Davison, and really liked what they did and really admired what they'd set up. And with a very similar culture to myself in terms of practice, that, you know, exercise and intensive exercise with, you know, the supervision of good physiotherapists will get most things better. Will get most things better. When it doesn't, it's often because the physio hasn't been intense enough, or the exercise hasn't been intensive enough. And you know, so I really admired that philosophy, which was trying to bring the sort of rehab physiotherapy lessons from elite sport and Stefano's previous experience in football, and bringing it to the wider population, albeit in the private sector in London.
And was that, when you went in there then, was that something that you found was a good next step for you out of elite sport?
Yes, I did. It was a new challenge. You do see, you know, and basically 90% of patients are just general public that you're offering your experience to, and then about 10% end up being professional athletes of one form or another. But yeah, it was excuse me, it was a good fit and a good way for me to get into London and see if I could, you know, hack it in London, and whether London would accept me, this Northern Oik.
Well, I mean, that is it. I mean, we're based in Manchester. I'm from the northwest as well, but I love going to London every time. But it's a completely different world down there. Like, how did you find that transition?
It is different. I mean, it's a major international city. So, you know, a vast, in some ways, a bit like football. You know, the majority of the players that you are seeing are not English. They're from all over the world. So yeah, about 40% might be English, or 45%, but they are literally from all over the world. So understanding their cultures, understanding, you know, their history, but also networking internationally with some of the other centres around the world, people that I've been lucky to get to know through the Isokinetic conference, and through introductions, you know, that was really, really helpful.
And then you had roles at the English National Ballet and still doing some work in cricket, if that's correct. How did those roles come about?
Again, they largely sort of evolved out of the Isokinetic role, really. I started seeing some ballet dancers from the English National Ballet, and then subsequently Andy Reynolds, who's an excellent physio and used to work at Harlequin. So I've known Andy for a long time. He took over the head of medical at the English National Ballet, and we sort of formalized it a little bit more. And so, you know, it evolved from that. But again, you know, fascinating to work with those athletes, and they are athletes, and they, you know, they know how to crack on and perform through pain like no other set of sports people I think I've ever come across.
Even more so than the rugby guys.
Yeah, they're tough.
It's an incredible facility, isn't it? Their new centre.
Yeah.
Andy gave me a tour before COVID. But yeah, amazing facility.
Yeah, it is. It is an incredible facility. Yeah.
So after Isokinetic, what happened with your move on from there?
Well, yeah, Cleveland Clinic is an organisation that I've largely been attracted to for many, many years. I mean, it's public knowledge, but I took a high-profile football manager out there for a problem back in the year 2000. And I went over to Cleveland Clinic, Ohio, and I thought, well, wow, this is how it should be. I would love to work for an organisation like this someday, but it'll never happen. And Cleveland Clinic have come to London. They have been developing their services in London, and they opened their Cleveland Clinic London Hospital actually today, 29th of March. And we've had the outpatient facility open for since September, but it is a state-of-the-art investment in health with incredible people, incredible technology. It is an incredible investment, and certainly such an exciting proposition that when I'd always thought, whilst this was being developed, would there be an opportunity for me? And an opportunity arose, and I've made the decision to move on from Isokinetic, hoping that something like this would come about, because I'm in the last 10 years of my career for sure, and I want this to be the high, and so I'm incredibly fortunate to be working for such a special organisation with, incredible people. Really, I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to visiting there, hopefully in the not too distant future. But yeah, I heard great things about the organisation, and you see a lot of their websites, one of the most visited, I think, in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we will. The complexity of the project is such that inevitably there's going to be one or two teething problems, but getting used to the computer and IT systems, it's a whole new challenge for me, which I'm just really loving, and I'm really enjoying, and I'm looking forward to doing my first clinic in the hospital itself in a couple of days' time, which will be my first clinic there, and to have the state-of-the-art facilities, all the medical specialists, to be working with great people from that perspective. I feel like I've suddenly become almost a bit credible, if that makes sense. For me, this jobbing guy that's gone from one to another, I feel I've finally found a place where if I can just wing it a bit longer, I'll be seen as credible.
No, good luck with the start of that one. And then I did read on one of your bios that you're into like reading books to relax and so on. So I'm just intrigued to find out what sort of books you read. Is it like fictional stuff? Is it self-development? What sort of things?
But both really. I've spent a range of things really. I've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years, I think, reading more history, particularly related to the Black Lives Matter issues, and some of those, really trying to understand some of the issues that occurred there. Obviously, it was highlighted by the murder of George Floyd, but I'm and I'm very mindful of the tragic death of Dalian Atkinson, though. I'm very mindful of that. So I've spent quite a lot of time reading about some of the diversity issues and some of the issues. I've just got, I'm about to start Michael Holding's book. And he obviously gave a very articulate view around this live in a rain-delayed match. He gave an articulate view on Sky Sports, and but his book, Why We Kneel and How We Rise, I'm very much looking forward to reading that. So those are some of the issues that I'm reading with at the moment. And occasionally I like a nice novel, a nice murder mystery, a bit of something like that, James Patterson or Harlan Coben or things of that nature. I enjoy.
Yeah, good to switch off to some of those ones, isn't it? Page turners.
Yeah, no, it is. You can just immerse yourself in those and find yourself in a completely different world.
Well, yeah, I think I've read pretty much every Jack Reacher, and I think I'm reading one now, which I'm sure I've read it before, but I can't tell because they all kind of they all interchange, don't they?
Yeah, they do. But yeah, no, again, very good. Yeah, very good. And actually, it's quite a good series on Netflix. I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, I've just finished that. Yeah, that was good. Very good. Great to switch off. Not that highbrow, but you don't always need that, do you? So.
Oh God, no. I'm not sure that I've ever been highbrow, but but no, yeah, no, I agree.
And then last question: are there any particular moments in like your long and very experienced career that like particularly stand out as being some of the best?
I think in terms of professional career, probably in order, I would say getting promotion with Blackburn. That was a great, achievement in some ways. And we'd lost, Jack had died that year. So we managed to clinch it and get second place behind Fulham with a sort of bit of a scabby result at Preston, away at Preston, which is obviously a local derby. That was fantastic. Winning the League Cup, back it wasn't at Wembley then because Wembley was being redeveloped, but beating Tottenham at the Millennium Stadium was a fantastic feeling. Obviously, winning the league and Aguero's goal going in, I mean, that whole season was managing to catch Man United because they were quite ahead of us for some. There was, I think, at one point they were 8 points ahead of us. But to just pull that off was an incredible achievement. And I think the last one was probably a private one more than anything else. Was when deja vu in some ways when I got the email acceptance or the contract from the Cleveland Clinic to say come and join us. And we're looking forward to you joining us because I really never thought that I would be privileged to do that. So that was a moment I had to sort of sit down and think, right, wow, maybe there is a bit of credibility to me in the end anyway. And I'm not just an admin mistake because somebody sent me a season ticket for Man United.
It's been 25 years and it's still going.
Yeah, it's longer than that. Yeah, it is 96 I started. So, 26 years and incredibly lucky. I'm enjoying cricket and the work I do with Middlesex as well. And to just go and watch some cricket at Lords and when I wish is an incredible privilege. So I've been phenomenally lucky, and rode my luck at times, I think. But I've had such great support from great colleagues and great friends that have enabled me to do that.
No, well, I think that's a great note to finish on. So I really appreciate your time and I wish you the best of luck in your dream role, it sounds like. So no, I'm really pleased that it's worked out and it's great to hear someone so passionate and delighted with something.
No, I'm loving what I'm doing. I've still got a way to go, but I always said that if you love your job, you never have to go to work, and I've been incredibly lucky.
Brilliant. Phil, really appreciate your time and thanks again for joining.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you.